We are live.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Google Developer Space channel, and thank you for tuning in to the live stream on a Sunday. A big hello to our friends watching on our YouTube channel and Facebook live stream on GDG Live Pakistan. So do make use of the live chat to ask questions, and we will get to them at the end of every speaker session. Before we begin, let me introduce briefly about what Google Developer Space do and who we are. So Google Developer Space is a platform for developers and startups around the region to connect, engage, and be inspired. As part of the developer relations team, we aim to empower and connect the community to our people, programs, network, and technologies, be it in person or online like today. So for today's session, we'll be talking about all things Flutter. And without further ado, I'll hand the stage over to Ken to start today's session. Over to you, Ken.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Ken. I'm a community manager for Google in South Asia. And thank you all for tuning today on a Sunday to join our Flutter Day for South Asia. And we will have 4 great speakers lining up for you. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker. Welcome, Brett Morgan from Flutter team. Okay, let's welcome Brett. Okay, Brett, over to you.
Thank you, Ken. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk. I decided to dive into the slightly ambiguous area that everyone keeps asking me every time I get on stage, and that is, what's the best way to do state management in Flutter? And I thought I'd answer it in the best way that I can, how to handle state in Flutter. And that's to look at this little diagram here that we've seen pop up fairly frequently, and that is Flutter is about transforming state into a user interface. So Flutter itself is fairly obvious. It's a set of build methods that put things on the screen, but there is an open question as to how to appropriately create and marshal and update state such that you're always displaying the right information on screen. So I'm going to do this the way I always do it, which is with some live coding. So let's break out of my all too short slide deck, slide that off screen, and we can see here, I'll just make sure this is all in the right places and hide that. So what we have here is a Flutter application, and what it's going to be is a shop for fonts. And these are a bunch of Google fonts. There's about 900 of them if you have a look at the Google Font API. How I'm getting at them is using the Google Fonts package. So what I want to do is effectively turn this straight list view into an actual application where people can turn around and have a look at the detail of the font, add it to a shopping cart, and then go from there. Okay. So we've got a running application. The first thing I look at, I go, I should probably actually use Google Fonts as opposed to the stock standard font at the top of the screen. And let's have a look and see how that's done. So we just turn around and add in some code, press save, and there we go. It turns around and change. So the most important thing I'm getting at here is that the whole reason to use Flutter is that you can make changes and get immediate feedback. But I'm guessing most of you are actual Flutter developers, so that's nothing new under the sun. Let's go a bit further. So what I'm going to do, after hitting save, is I'm going to turn around and create a bunch of buttons here that we can turn around and click on and actually add things to a shopping cart. So what we're going to do is we're turning this sample text. It was a stateless widget. It's now a stateful widget, because what we're going to do is turn around and add some state to this state object, and we're going to record, is this font in our cart or not? So how do we do that? Well, obviously, we add a onPressed handler and change the state. So I can wander over here and click on, something's not working. And it's about now that I'd usually throw to the audience and go, what have I done wrong? But given the fact this is a one-way broadcast thing, I'm just going to have to assume you all already knew I was missing my add state call, or set state call. So I turn around and hit save, and suddenly I've got a bunch of tick marks here for things that I've added to the shopping cart. So I'm done, right? I've got things in the shopping cart. What more could I want? Well, okay, let's test something here. Let's add everything to the shopping cart. Actually, let's add this one as well. And let's scroll up. And I'm going to ask a silly question. Now that I've scrolled them off screen, how many of these objects, how many of these fonts that I've added to my shopping cart are still there? Well, let's scroll back down. Oops, I lost a bunch of them. How the heck did that happen? What happened there? And the simple answer is our good old friend, Mr. Garbage Collection, has kicked in and gone, well, those state objects associated with lines in that list view that are no longer on screen can be garbage collected. And it's done a very efficient job of losing the state that those fonts that we added to the shopping cart were in the shopping cart. So a less than useful shopping cart. So we should probably restructure things to actually hold on to the fact that we've added things to a shopping cart. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is start defining an interface. So I'm declaring a type that is effectively a void callback function. I'm converting this sample text widget from a stateful object, well, a stateful widget where we had the sample text remembering if it was added or not. I've turned it back into a stateless widget, and now it has this API effectively that it says, if you tell me what font family I'm displaying, whether I've been added to the shopping cart, and finally give me a way to notify that my add button has been clicked on. Well, now that we've done that, and if I press save, we'll see the all too frequent red screen of doom. But that's okay. This is Flutter. We can code our way out of it. So let's do that. So the next thing I'm going to do is my homepage was previously a stateless widget. I'm now turning it into a stateful widget so that I can again add some state. So now I've pulled the shopping cart up one layer. So it's now, instead of being at the line layer, it's now at effectively the page level. So now we have a list of items in the shopping cart, and we can turn around and properly call the sample text widget with, you're in this font, you're either in the cart or not, and here's a way of turning around and changing that. So if we press save, okay, we're back. We can turn around and add a bunch of fonts to the shopping cart, scroll them off the screen, bring them back down, and they're still there. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to get to about thinking about how to do state in Flutter, is think about where in the tree that state sits and how important it is to hold on to. So if it's something that's important to the user, you hold on to it reasonably tightly, whereas if it's state about a widget that's ephemeral and can be regenerated later, you don't need to push it too far up the tree. Okay, let's drive on. So actually I should point out what we're going to do next. So at this point, I've got a font shop, I've got a list of fonts, I can add them to the shopping cart, but what would be nice is that if I could click on the line and go and see a bit more information about that font. So let's turn around and add an on-tap handler to the list tile, and let's start coding in a screen to actually put there. So we're going to have a detail page, and we'll add a navigator to be able to push that page. So let's press save, and let's pick on Advent Pro. Now, again, I've got the red screen of doom, but again, this shouldn't be scary to you. You should have seen this many, many times. And we can just turn around, and the reason we're seeing it is this little throw unimplemented error. We can just turn around and put a scaffold in, press save, and we've got a screen. So here's a really important widget. This is a widget I love a lot. This is a way of immediately throwing up some content that you don't have yet. Frequently used like images I haven't got yet, or some text that I'm going to be getting later. I can just block it in. And I can start getting a feel for the layout of the page. Let's start putting some content. We can have a list view, What are we going to put in it? Well, let's turn around and, now sorry, my typing is a bit slow at this point. We're going to put in effectively a series of pieces of the font you've chosen, and we're going to put them at different sizes. Oh, it's always fun watching my editor actually type for me. I wish I could get this done in real life. Almost there. Headline 4 and a couple of bodies. Body text 1 and 2. And there we go. Press save. And we've got the start of a detail page. And yes, I know all the designers in the audience are currently screaming about the lack of white space between the edge of the phone and the font. The things you see when you step on stage. Okay. That's great. So I've got them different sizes. It'd be nice to have them at different weights as well. So let's turn around and do that. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do here is show off something that we added to the language reasonably recently. And quite a few people haven't really dug into it yet. And that's a thing called a collection for. We also have collection if. But what I'm getting at here is I've got a bunch of things that I want to replicate. Hit save. And as you can see, I picked Advent Pro because we've actually got a collection of different weights. Quite a few fonts only have two font weights. Whereas if you have a look here, you can see that there's differences pretty much all the way up the scale. So there's got to be at least 5 or 6 different font weights there, which this is a very nice font. So getting back to it, what I'm doing is I'm iterating through this collection of font weight objects, and for each one generating a line of text. And this is all in the context of a list. This is very useful for when you want to programmatically dump out a bunch of content. Likewise, we've got an if to turn around and conditionally add stuff to a display depending on whether or not a Boolean is set. Okay, this is cool. We have a screen. What next? Yes. Probably should back up one. Okay, so if I go back to this page and if I scroll around, one of the things that's bugging me is this state. One of the problems we have here is that, and this is not so much a correctness issue, this is a performance issue. When I tap on a button, I'm actually firing, if we look deep down here, set state on the my home page state, which means that I'm re-rendering effectively the whole page. And it would be nice to actually collapse this down so that we're not damaging the whole screen, but instead restricting the area that has to be repainted. So let's turn around and implement that. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to create a more structure over the state. I'll get back to why it's turned red in a second. So what I'm doing is for every font family that we have, so there's 900 odd fonts, I'm turning around and creating a value notifier over bool for each one of the fonts. Now, of course, because I've changed card items, I didn't rename it, but I changed it from a hash map of strings, from a set of strings to a map of string to bool. This screen is all upset. And the easy way to fix that is just to reload. And there we go, we're back again. We've lost some state, but it was not in a way we could use it. So we can now add things again. And that's all we've changed so far. But the other thing to notice is that we've got this value listener builder. And this ties onto the value notifier, which means that now when I click on this button, I'm only repainting this one line. The rest of the lines on the screen are stable because we're not calling set state on the whole screen. But you know, it would be nicer, as opposed to redrawing the whole screen, to actually push this further down. So let's do that. So as you can see, I've changed the exposed interface for sample text, our list tile builder. Previously, we were taking the font family, whether it was in the list, and a callback. Now I'm actually taking the value notifier itself. And if we look further down, we can now see we're using the value listenable builder, but we're doing it over the trailing icon button. What this means is up here, when we're building our list view, these sample text widgets stay stable, which means now when I press this button, instead of painting the whole line, I'm only repainting the button. These sorts of small wins can be quite useful when you're trying to do animation, 60 frames per second. But again, it's always when you come to optimizations, measure first. Actually figure out if you do have a problem. Just doing these sorts of changes just because it is going to be faster, you may be wasting your time. Okay, let's go a bit further in. So the next thing I'm going to do, as you can see on the font detail page, so let's again go back and pick on our friend Advent Pro. We've got this page, we've got a name, we've got some detail. It'd be nice to have a button down the bottom that says, yes, I want this font. So what we're going to do is we plumb through the value notifier. So this gives us the ability to notify from this page to add this font to the cart or not. So let's go ahead and start doing that. And something very bad's about to happen. Let's dig into why. Everything just broke. Well, not really. Everything just disappeared. Previously, actually I might just take it back to where it was before. As you can see, initially what we had, once it finishes typing, is we had the body had a list view, which meant the list view by nature of being the only thing inside the body was expanded to its full width and height of the viewable area. And what I'm doing, because I'm going to put a button underneath it, is that I'm putting the list view inside of a column, which is our vertical layout widget, which means that suddenly the list view doesn't know how big it should be, so it collapses to 0. And how do we get around that? Well, there's a really easy fix. We turn around and wrap it and expand it. Press save, we've got our thing back. So now that we've got this expanded widget wrapped around everything, we can turn around out of ButtonBar, press save. Oops. Oops. Oh dear. I'll just have to reload. I did things in the wrong order. I wound up, one of the things that happens when you're busy rebuilding these things is you wind up with state objects that are not the correct shape. And what happened there was that I was on a page and then added structure to it while it was already loaded, which meant the state objects hadn't changed. So if I go back to Advent Pro, this time you can now see the button because it now actually has the value notifier, whereas previously it didn't. The sorts of things you only get into during live coding. Looking at this, I like the fact that I've got a button. I'd really prefer it to be centerable, will be centered, and that's a reasonably easy fix. We just turn around and give an alignment, hit save, there we go. So now we can add it to the cart. We go back here, Advent Pro is added. We can click on that, remove it from the cart, come back to the list. Advent Pro is no longer in the cart. Cool. So that's useful. We're going to have a cart. We've added things to the cart. We take things out of the cart. But there is a problem. I've got this shopping cart, which is somewhere in here. Here it is. So here's my shopping cart. It's buried in the middle of a widget, and I've got really no way to see it in my code. I have to sort of know where it is. It's sort of spread around. It'd be nice to actually centralize it so that I can start doing things with it. So how do you one way to do that is to turn around and use provider. Now, I'm not saying provider is the one true way. I'm saying provider is a way of doing this. There are many different ways. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, with provider, I can turn around and start naming the concept. So I've got a shopping cart. It now has some content. We have all of our fonts with value notifiers. So we're pulling the concept up the tree. Now what we need to do also is turn around and provide the shopping cart down the tree. This makes the shopping cart available at various points in the tree that need to get to it. So let's plumb it in. So obviously, previously our homepage was a stateful widget. It's now stateless again because it has no state anymore, and it just consumes the shopping cart. So hopefully we can click on things and things still work, which is good. Now it'd be interesting, I might just hit reload in case I've confused things behind the scenes. What can we actually do with the fact that we have this shopping cart object? Well, oh yeah, let's actually use it. So we're using the value notifier, we're adding items to it appropriately, and for various reasons, mostly me being lazy, I decided I wanted to introduce the concept of having some sort of server, some sort of two-way server that I could turn around and have multiple devices talking to. And I was looking at doing it using WebSockets, but well, I do gRPC during my day job. So I've decided, what the heck, I'll just use gRPC. So let's just reach into my back pocket and pull out something I built earlier, which is a little baby gRPC server. So now we've got a gRPC server, and if I bring up my debug console, we'll be able to see, yes, I've got a gRPC server. Cool. So now I can turn around and start implementing having this talk to a gRPC server. So what I'm going to do is create a channel. The channel gives us the ability to connect, in this instance, insecurely to a server on localhost, which you just saw me bring up. This is going to be the way that we effectively talk to the server by sending RPCs to the client, either adding or removing a font family to the shopping cart. And finally, we turn around and listen to a streaming connection on that gRPC server that tells us what the latest state is. And as much fun as watching me talk to myself, it would be more interesting if I actually brought up another instance so that we can actually see things working together. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to go and bring in the iPhone. Actually, no, I've got the iPhone running. I want an iPad. Bring up a second machine. So I should be able to just hide that. Bring up our debug console. So I've got my iPhone is working fine. iPad is launching the gRPC server. So in theory, if I click on things, oops, why is this not happy? Just going to reset some state. I should be able to click on that, and you'll see that's talking. If I look here, I suddenly got a gRPC server that knows what font state is. Okay. So I've got some stuff happening. Good. Now, hopefully, sitting around here somewhere, there should be an iPad. Why did you take so long? No wonder my machine's getting hot. Good old Xcode. Xcode build is done. Should be able to drag my little trusty iPad on screen. and it should come up. So now I can turn around and add things. I can go into Advent Pro, add it to the cart, and if I slide this over, you should be able to see things adding and removing. So, GRPC, it's a cool thing to play with. Let me shut that down. It gives us real-time communication, but there's a slight problem. As you probably see, I don't have error handling, so if I were to, or I don't know, shut down my GRPC server or walk in between the two endpoints, my phone app would die. It would be much better if in between my application and the GRPC server there was some sort of caching layer using, I don't know, SQLite. And as much as I could sit here and build it using SQLite, there is actually a product that we have that actually implements all of this for you. And if I start typing, you can probably see where I'm going. I'm going to use Cloud Firestore to effectively build this real-time, soft real-time connection between two phones. And just to make my life easier, let's dive ahead and start implementing it. So what am I doing? Previous step was I've imported Cloud Firestore. Now I'm going to turn around and add in the shopping cart, which is now a Firestore collection. So the server is going to be a little bit funny in that I'm going to have a server that has a collection just of the items in my shopping cart. Not exactly something you want to do for multiple users, but we can get into that later. Okay, what else do we need to do? We need to turn around and change the code on when an item is changed. Previously, we were doing this separate RPC calls for adding and removing. Now all we're going to do is set the state of a Firestore document to turn around and say whether a font is in the shopping cart or not. We need to turn around and listen to a stream of events that happen. And when we get notified that a document has changed, we turn around and change our internal state. And finally, we tidy everything up. And then I go and, oh, I don't know, let's really make my laptop hurt and run Android. So Android, fire that up. I can also stop that GRPC server. I don't need it anymore. Take that back to the home screen. Somewhere here, I have an Android. Come here. So debug console, Android. So this is going to take a minute or two to come up. And usually at this point, I would start asking for questions. But given the fact that this is not a live environment, what I'm going to do is go back to my slides and then come back to this when hopefully Android will have, oh, actually no, it's up. So in theory, if I reset that one and reset that one, we should see communication between the two. And in fact, I can go all the way and drag in this guy, and we can see I have a series of fonts here. I've got the Abbas font currently in the collection, and I can click it in, click it out. And in fact, I can even go further and pretending that I'm a server, I can turn around and start making changes to things on the server side, and they turn around and float through. Okay. So that's all my live coding. Let's get back to the deck and talk about what I just showed you. So I showed you there's a bunch of different ways to do state in Flutter. So I had a stateful widget. I think I snuck in a stream builder, a value listenable builder, provider. I didn't sneak in block, Rx, Redux. What am I trying to say here? Well, going back to this diagram I showed at the start, where in Flutter, the UI is a function of state. What I'm really getting at is Flutter itself knows how to handle state, knows how to handle showing state as long as you tell us that the state has changed. So it's really on you as a developer to figure out how to set up your state such that you can maintain your state and you can tell us that a certain part of the state has changed and thus needs to be redisplayed. How you do that doesn't really worry Flutter. It's up to you to make sure you always tell us things have changed, which is kind of why I left the set state out initially, to turn around and go, if you don't tell Flutter that something has changed, we won't know to show people that it's changed. So please make sure you always tell us when things change. Over and above that, if you're doing animations and you're not seeing 60 frames per second on your target devices, then break out the tooling and start going, okay, can I reduce the blast radius, if you will, of a change? Initially, when we had a change, I was effectively saying set state at the top level and repainting the whole list. Now in Flutter, this is actually reasonably fast because we're doing pointer comparisons and all that sort of thing. So as long as things are reasonably stable in memory, we'll be quick. But in cases where you've got somewhere deep down the tree that's changing, it can be really advantageous if you limit the blast radius of the change to just that thing, which is why I turn around and show going from repainting the whole list to repainting just a list tile to finally repainting just a button. And these are the sorts of ways that we can turn around and help Flutter be fast, but it's not a hard requirement initially during initial development while you're still figuring out which way is up. Oh yeah, and I should say, whether you use provider, block, Rx, Redux, etc., very much what works for you and your team. We're on the Flutter team. We have opinions as to which ones are better, but if you talk to more than one member of the Flutter team, you'll suddenly decide to find out that each of us has a different version as to what's the best thing. I personally really like Value Listener Builder. I really like Stream Builder. Philip, my colleague, really loves Provider, so on and so forth. And there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just what works for you and the way you model the problem you're trying to solve. Okay. And with that, I thank you, and back to you, Ken. Hey, Ken.
Thank you, Brett, for your talk. I think there's some there's no question yet on the chat, but you can maybe you go to YouTube and start a chat and answer from there directly. And sorry, let's welcome our next speaker, Yong Chen. Okay. Okay, let's welcome our next speaker, Yong Chen. Hello.
Okay, hello. Thanks, Ken. Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about how do you write automated tests for your Flutter apps. So before we start, let me introduce myself. So my name is Yong Shean. I am a web and mobile app developer. Actually now just more focused on mobile app. I'm developing Android and iOS app using Flutter for my company, Comerge. And yeah, if you want to get connected with me, then you can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I also write some blog articles on Medium. So yeah, let's get started. So perhaps I don't have to convince you at this point, like why should you write tests? Because that's part of the essence of software development, where the purpose of tests is to verify if your app works as expected. So we will want to automate the test as much as possible so that when we want to deliver or ship our app it can be faster, and you don't have to worry too much about whether your changes or your bug fixes, it actually breaks some other parts of the app. So there are generally there are 4 different types of testing. If you are not new to software testing, then probably you have seen this before. So I adopt this diagram from the testing pyramid that was created by Ken C. Dots from the React world. So if you guys have heard about him, then probably it's not new for you. So there are 4 different types of tests here. So the first part is static analysis, which helps to do the type checking. So as you might have known that Dart is a type language, unlike some other languages that you might have come across before, like JavaScript or Python. They are more dynamic, but for Dart, you have to define all the types in your code. So at least at this part, if you want to make sure that your type matches, then it's already been done by Dart itself. Then going up one level up, which is the unit testing and also the widget test. So unit test is just testing your functions or each of your methods if it's working as expected. Then after that, you have the widget test, because in Flutter, you are using widgets. So even your app itself is a widget that contains of many child widgets. Like I think I can show you later. And finally, we have the integration testing. This one in the world outside of Flutter, I think most people will regard this as the end-to-end test, where you have to fire up an instance. If let's say you are testing on browser, on web, then you are firing up a browser to run the test. Then for mobile apps, then you are actually firing up an Android or iOS emulator to run the integration test. So here I show you the development or testing cycle. So at which point you should write tests and at which point you should implement the function. So it depends on you or the team. See whether if you want to opt for test-driven development, so it's the TDD, then you will start to write tests first. Or else, if you're like me, then I actually prefer to implement the function first. Then after that, I write the test for that function. Then after you have written the test, then you should run the test once and see if the test failed. If it fails, then you can check, okay, if your test is written correctly, then you can go back to your function implementation and change some of the code and run your test again. So you repeat the cycle until you got your test pass. Then after that, yeah, you can take a break and then continue to write the next function or the next test. So first of all, let's talk about the unit test. So what is a unit test? A unit test, it tests a single function, method, or class, where the goal is to verify if the function is correct under a variety of conditions. So in this test, if there's any external dependencies, they should be mocked out. So unit tests, they are limited to things. So they don't do like they don't do the this IO. They don't read or write to this. They also are not in charge of rendering to screen, nor they are testing whether the function can receive a user actions from outside the process or not. So let's look at one of the example function. So this is one of the implementation that I've written. This is a validation function. So for example, if you have a text field that takes in some values, so before user submit the form, then you want to make sure that, okay, at least there is a value in this mandatory field. So I can put in this is required validator in my form. So what these functions do is it will take in a string value, and then it will check if the value is empty, then it should return an error message called required, else it will just return now. So yep, when you are writing the test, then you should ask yourself a few questions. So for me, I will ask like, okay, if I did not provide anything to the function, will it return me required? And then the second question, I will say, okay, if I did provide something, a value to the function, will it return me now? Now means there is no error message or anything is returned. Okay. So this is how your test would look like. So the group is something that helps you to group similar tests together. It is not something that you need to put every time, but when you have a lot of tests, then it can help to organize your tests correctly. Then you can write your test description here. And then inside you have the expect statement that checks that, okay, if my function is required, and then I put in the input that is empty, then it should return me this string. Then the second test, which is if the input is not empty, then it should return me now. So I just I use the function here, and then I put something like a letter A, then I should expect that the output is now. So far, I think it looks pretty straightforward for unit tests, because we should only let a function to do one thing. So that's the single responsibility principle. So when you are writing tests, it actually helps you to limit what a function can do. So next, I will show you an example when we have external dependencies. How should we mock the dependencies out? For example, if you have this function that depends on some remote data here, for example, I have the supplier service, and then I have a function that fetch something. So what it is fetching? It is fetching a post from the supplier API. So you can imagine that the implementation of this is a HTTP GET call that return me a JSON of a list of posts, probably. And then, yeah, I can put them into a list of supplier object if I like. So what happens if we test this directly? Actually, if your API, if your fetch method, it doesn't require you, for example, an authentication header, you probably still can run the test correctly. But then if you are building an app where, okay, if you call this API, you need to log in first, you need to get some token to authenticate your request, then you will face issue when you are running the test. So what do? Is we need to create a mock of this API. So we can use Mockito to help us to create a mock version of the supplier API. So once we have created, then we can pass it in to our original supplier service. So like here, I will need to add some one extra argument to here, so it can take in the API client, then I can use it here. So after that, then you can continue your test as usual. So the good thing about using Mockito is you can define what is the expected response from your mock function. For example, just now I have created the mock supplier API, which is extended from the mock class from Mockito. Then here I can use the when, then answer. So when is when you call this function, then it should return a list of supplier. So you can define what is the expected response that you want from your function. So in this way, you can define a few scenarios. For example, if you have an empty list, so you can define, okay, for this test, I want to test if my function can handle empty list correctly. Then I have the second scenario, which is it return me a list of one supplier object. So here you can define like, okay, when supplier API.fetch suppliers, then it should return me this list of supplier, which I've just defined here. Then after that, you write your test. Okay, the testing is actually your supplier service. So when it fetch all, then I should expect that the result should contain a length of 0. And then the second test is, okay, I should expect this result should contain this supplier object. All right, then after that, we have widget test. But I think before we go into that, I can show you in the code, how should the unit test look like? So for example, here I have the fetch post button I created. Then when I click on this, then actually it is printing out the result that I fetched from the post service. Let's look at here. Yep. So I have a flat button that with the label fetch post, which is this one. So when I press it, it should call my post service and fetch all. So let's take a look at our post service. So in the post service here, here I have the API provider. So I define this so that in my test, I can put in my mock API provider. So if it's not in the test environment, then it should just take the default API provider. So I have the fetch all function defined here. So I'm calling on the fetch post method from my API provider. And then I just print out the result, which is what you see in the console. So API provider is nothing special. It's just a HTTP GET call, and then I put it, I decode the JSON and then put it into a post model object. Okay, then how about the test? So the test should look like this. When the fetch all is called, it should return a post model object. So here I can use the when, then answer. Here I just put in the mock API provider, which I create here. So it extends the mock object from Mockito. Then after that, okay, I want it to return me a post model with title and body. So when I run this, I will just say, okay, I want to make sure that the result is a type of post model. So let's run this. Then you should be able to see it here. Yep. So green tick, pass. And then it prints out that, okay, the title is actually this title. Okay, let's go back to the deck. So next, I will talk about the widget test. What is a widget test? So the widget test, the goal is to verify a single widget if the UI looks and interacts as expected. So it involves, it can involve multiple classes or it can involve multiple child widgets if you have many child widgets under that widget. And also it requires a test environment that provides the lifecycle context for that widget. So what widget test can do, it actually can do everything that unit tests can do, and it is responsible to render the layout and instantiate the child widgets. You can also test whether it can receive and respond to user actions and events correctly. So for example, if you have this widget, I think you probably have seen this before. If you have used the Flutter create command to create a new Flutter project, then yeah. So this is the code. And then when you want to write the test, just like when we are writing unit tests, you should ask yourself a few questions as if you are testing it manually. So the first question I would ask is, will it display all the info that I'm expecting to see on the widget? And then I will ask also, okay, if I tap the button, will it show me the new number? So how will you write the test? First, you have to pump the widget. So my app is actually the root widget that contains this my homepage widget. You can also only pump the my homepage widget if you want. So it depends on you what is the context of the widget you want to test. So first you can check the initial state. Okay, at least I want when the widget is rendered, you should be able to find the text 0 on the widget. So here you say expect find.text finds one widget. And then you might also want to expect that you are not finding the text 1 or anything else at the beginning. After that, you can start to simulate an action, which is you can run the tester.tab. So here you are finding the add icon on the screen. Then after that, you run a tester.pump. This is to ask Flutter to build the widget again in the test environment, because in the test environment, unlike when you are debugging the app, it will build the app, build the widget again when the state change. But in the test environment, you have to do it manually. So you have to run the pump method. Then after that, you should check that, okay, now you should no longer see the text 0, and now you should see the text 1. So that's what the tests do. Then you might also want to simulate some other events, not only the button tap events. You can also simulate, for example, the scrolling events and the pull to refresh events. So if you want to simulate scrolling, then you can use the tester.fling, and then you put your finder as the viewport, and then you define how much you want to scroll. So I just put the values here, which is the widget height. Then for the widget height, you can find out from the media query command. And then same goes to pull to refresh. This time you can use the tester.drag to simulate the pulling action, and then by how much. So there are some other events that you can simulate also, like for example, if you have the swipe left or swipe right, then you can use tester.drag as well. Or if you have a form, you have text field, then you can use the tester.enter text. Then make sure you find the field here, and then what is the value you want to key in the field. So just now I talked about the tester.pump. So sometimes you will need to run the tester.pump and settle. So if you have a series of events running in the widget, then after you have performed certain actions like tester.tap or tester.drag, then if you are expecting some state changes or some widget changes, then you should run the tester.pump and settle. So when you run this, it will pump a few frames until it no longer have any frames that is scheduled after that. So I mostly use this. Sometimes I would use the tester.pump, and then you can also put in your duration. So just now I have shown that how can you run your unit test and widget test in Visual Studio Code. You can also run in the command. So you can run Flutter test. Let's see. Yeah. So when I run Flutter test in my terminal, then it will run all the tests that it can find. So what you can do is for all the tests, it should end with test.dart. So it can do all the magic here. Or if you're like me, you are using Visual Studio Code, you can also click on run just right above of your test definition. Or if you want to run the whole the test that is inside the file, you can also click on this one. Then you can see the result at the panel here. And then finally, we have integration tests. So what is an integration test? Integration test is an end-to-end test. It has a complete app or a large part of the app. And the goal is to verify that everything that is contained in the app, including all the widgets and your services, including your backend, work together as expected. And then some might also use this to verify your app's performance. So integration test, because it's end-to-end, it can do everything that widget test and unit test can do. And actually it runs on a real device or an OS simulator. So and because it runs very slow, so they are isolated from unit tests and widget tests. So when you run the Flutter test command just now, it doesn't actually run the integration test, even though you have already included in your project. So this is an example of an integration test. So first, you will need to import and use the Flutter driver. And then you need to connect to the Flutter driver in your setup. And then after your tests have completed, then you should close the driver. Then you will continue to write your tests here. So it's the code is a bit similar, except that it uses the driver to get the finder, and then it checks that okay, the counter should start at 0. Then when you tap on the button, then it should increment by 1. So you should be able to find 1 in my counter text now. So how do you run the integration test? The command is different. So this time you need to run Flutter drive and then define your target. So let's see like what tests you should write. Just now I've talked about the unit test, widget test, and integration test. So it actually depends. Each test has its own purpose. So like just now I mentioned that integration tests can do everything that widget test and unit test can do. So it gives you the highest confidence because it tests everything in one package. But the maintenance cost is also the highest. So you can see that, okay, this one has very, it provides lower confidence compared to widget test and integration tests. But the good thing is it also has fewer dependencies and the execution speed is very quick. That means as you are developing your code, as you are changing it, you can run unit tests and widget tests rather quickly instead of you have to wait for the integration test to finish running first before you can continue to make the changes. So you can see that you should gauge yourself. You should write a good balance of these 3 different types of tests. And then how much tests you should write, actually, it depends on your code coverage. So code coverage is a measure of how much code is executed during testing. And notice that this is different from test coverage, which is a measure of how much test cases is executed. So if you haven't heard of code coverage, it is actually important to ensure that your code is thoroughly tested and it would fail, that it would not fail on the edge cases. So for example, if you have code coverage of 50%, but then you see the all tests is passed, how much confidence do you have for your code? It's actually quite low because your test, it only covers 50% of your code. So it depends on which number is better for you and your team. Some team would say that, okay, maybe 70% is good enough. Some, they say, okay, must have 90% or a perfect 100%. So yeah, it depends on your team. So how to check your code coverage? I can show you in the code again here. So I can run Flutter test -- coverage. So this will not only run all the tests, but it will also generate a coverage file called the lconf.info. So this is the file it has generated, but then it is not very readable. So what we can do is we can use the gen HTML command to help us to generate a report from here. So what I can do is I use the gen HTML command, and then I define the output folder, and then this is the input file. So I have actually run this command before, so I will not run it again. The output is here. So you can see a bunch of HTML files, which you can open with your browser. Then you can see, okay, my coverage of this project is 83% overall. And then you can see the line coverage in each file. So you see this file has the lowest coverage. So if you click inside, you can see, okay, these are the missing lines from your test, because the test that you write, it did not cover these lines. So you should probably write more tests to improve your test coverage, code coverage, sorry. So my presentation is about to end. So where do you go from here after you have learned an introduction to what is testing all about, what are the types of tests? Then you can check out the Flutter testing codebooks. There are many examples inside. And I find this how to do unit testing in Flutter post by field stacks is quite useful for me. So you can check out this website also. Yeah, that's all for the presentation. Thank you very much. If you guys have any questions.
How do you know what would be the maintenance cost on the slide, which test that they should do? Can you see it on the? Yeah.
Oh, maintenance cost. Maintenance cost. Yeah, I put it here. For unit test is the lowest because when you have written a small function and the cost is low is because you are unlikely to make changes to all the smaller functions. But if you are writing widget tests, it is higher because in one widget, you might call several smaller functions, or it might contain some child widgets. So when your widget has changes, then you probably have to make changes to your widget test as well. And then for integration test is the highest because let's say when you have some feature changes, then you have to make a lot of changes to the integration test that you have written. So that's what I meant by the maintenance cost.
Sorry. Thank you, Yongchen. If you have more questions, feel free to add them to the chat. And let's welcome our next speaker, Sakina from Pakistan. Let's hand over for you, Sakina. Sorry, Sakina, you are on mute. Okay, let's give a welcome to Sakina again, and let's start. Thank you.
Hello everyone. How are you doing on this wonderful Sunday evening or Sunday afternoon? My name is Sakina and I'm here with a very interesting topic for you guys. So basically, when I started Flutter development, I realized that uh, it's really developer friendly, it's really flexible, and I just love how you can integrate the functionality part with the UI, with the UI component for this. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing here today is I'm going to be doing a live coding session with you guys. I'll be showing what layout we're going to be coding in Flutter, and I'm going to be sprinkling it with a little bit of functionality so you can see how UI changes are reflected as you interact with your layouts. Okay. Before doing that, of course, let me introduce myself to you guys. So my name is Sakina Abbas. I'm co-founder and CEO of ReacTree. We are a software house and we specialize in web and mobile applications. Here, I'm currently leading the DevOps and the Flutter development team. And I've also recently joined Flutter Karachi, Pakistan as a senior Flutter developer. So that's really interesting. Gave an interesting session about last weekend about the perspective of Android development towards a Flutter development. So that was nice. And so without further ado, let's get right into it, shall we? Okay, so I'm not going to be coding some of those boring UIs, okay? Let's do something interesting. Something that I have fun coding, something that you have fun watching. So I found this really nice looking layout for a music app. So we'll be coding this specific screen only. Okay, not the entire application, just the specific screen. It's taken from this guy Masoom Pervez, just to give him the credits for doing this wonderful work. And the work is obviously published on Dribble, so you can check it out. So before we delve into coding straight away, let's first look at this layout and let's try to analyze and basically decompose it into the different widgets that we will be essentially using in order to structure our application. Okay, so right away, there are a couple of things. There are like 3 to 4 main things that come right away to my mind when I look at the screen. First of all, we have this nice looking background color. Then we have this app bar that has 2 buttons, 2 icons, and a title. The app bar looks transparent, so there's that. We have a circular widget showing the album art inside it, and it appears to have some sort of elevation too, I guess. Then we have the title of the song, I guess, and then the artist name. Then we have this nice looking container at the bottom that's essentially fixed at the bottom of the screen. It has some of the main controls such as play button, next button, go back button, you know, all that stuff. We have the times, of course, the timestamps, and then we have a slider, a curved looking slider. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is that I won't exactly be replicating this entire thing because, as you can see, this volume panel, it's a bit redundant because when you're listening to music on your mobile and you want to control your volumes, so you just control the volume from the volume buttons of your phone, right? So we're not going to be incorporating this section, but what we're going to do is that we're going to tweak this thing a little bit and try to incorporate it inside it. So let's see how it goes. Okay. All right. In order to save time, I have already created this basic Flutter project that you guys can see right now. So let's get right into it. Sorry for the voice, guys. I'm a little sick. All right, let's create a new Dart file by the name of details. Adding the import for material. Now, the important thing to notice is that since this screen is such that it demands user interaction, which means that upon user interaction, you will be essentially changing the layout or some of the widgets or basically the state of the widgets in your screen. What we need here is a stateful widget. So I'm just going to type the shortcut here, give it a nice name, now plain screen. Okay, let's return a scaffold here. App bar title, text. Hello. Okay, let's start with something basic first. Okay. Adding the import for the details file. Okay, let's see how this works. Okay, we have done the first step, which is creating the screen. Okay, now let's create another file by the name of constants, where we will be storing all the colors, textiles. It really makes the code really modular, so I definitely recommend this approach. I have already, in order to save time, already previously tested out the different colors, different textiles that we'll be using. So yeah. Okay, why is this? Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, all right. Now, let's give it first a background color. So, okay, gotta import the constants file as well. All right. Now, for the background color, we'll be using that deep dark purplish color that we just copied over here. Just to give you guys an overview, what I have here is different colors that I'll be using. The color of the button that I need to use, the different sizes of the different sizes that I need to keep for each of the buttons, different textiles in which I'll be styling my time text, the timestamps text, the album title text, and the song title text and the song text. So these are just the textiles. And here I have URLs of some of the images that I'll be using via the network image. Okay. So let's give this thing a purple color. Huh. Where is this arrow? Oh. What did I miss here? Okay, let's just comment this out for the time being, and we'll check it out later. Okay. So we're done with the background part. Now we need to add the leading icon. I'm gonna use the icon button here. Give it an icon. Icons dot arrow drop down circle. We're not implementing any functionality for this because obviously the essence of our session here is that you guys understand how quickly and conveniently we can code the most complex of the UIs in Flutter. Okay, so we have that. For the title here, we have My Music as the app bar title. So music, and notice that it's centered aligned. So we're gonna use the center title parameter and set it to true. Okay, so far so good. The next thing that we want to use is the trailing part. Okay, so for that we're gonna use the actions parameter, which is essentially gonna take an icon button again. Okay, so far so good. Now what's the next step? Now you realize that here it's transparent, okay? So it's basically reflecting the background color that we have underneath, but here it's using the default Flutter theme, okay? So let's edit that using the background color property and setting color to transparent. Okay, now we have another problem. The problem is that even though we've given it a transparent feel, it's still not becoming transparent, okay? So how do we go about that? Let's see how we can fix this. Okay, so what we're gonna do is that let's use a stack to control that, okay? I'm gonna wrap this inside a stack. Convert this to children. Oh, damn it. In fact, let's just Google it. Okay. Transparent. Okay, now this full disclaimer here, you guys. The essence of this session is to show you that I'm not a robot, okay? There are certain things that obviously it'll slip my mind. So the best thing to do is to Google them. So that is how I'm showing you that even if you're a Flutter beginner, Flutter advanced, there are things that you'll always have to Google. So that's what we're doing here, okay? So here, this is the exact approach that we're following here. We're gonna be returning a scaffold, and we are gonna be using a stack, like I said, in place of the body parameter, okay? So let's wrap this thing up. Body stack. Okay. Okay, let's see how this goes. Aha, perfect. We have achieved our first milestone. Now, the second step is to code this part, which will be essentially inside a column. Okay, so if you try to break it down into concrete widget and the widget hierarchy that we'll be following here. So we're returning a scaffold with a background color. And all of this that you see here is a stack because we're overlaying it on the background color, okay, to give this effect. So what we've done so far is that we have wrapped our entire body inside a stack, and we have so far used an app bar. Now, in order to simplify things and the widget hierarchies a little, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to wrap my app bar inside a column so that it is easier for me to code all of this by putting it directly inside my column. So I don't have to use the position widget for each and every widget that I will be using. Because essentially what the position widget does is that it positions your widget on the specifics that you've provided. So for instance, if I just, without changing any of the parameters of the position widget, if I just wrap this nice looking circular widget inside a position, it'll essentially be showing here at the top left corner. And we don't want that. We want this kind of looking hierarchy. And I also don't want to make my code really verbose. So I wouldn't be using position that much. That's why I'll just be directly putting it all inside the column view. So let's do that. Yeah, okay. So we have our app bar. The next thing we need is a circle avatar. Give it a radius of, I don't know, 80, yes. Background image, network image, and let's use this Selenium one, okay? And of course, a size box in order to add some padding between the circular avatar and the app bar. Okay. and give it a nice purple color so that when it's loading, it's not using the default blue color. Okay. Now, another thing that we have noticed is that what is this background thingy that's appearing here? I mean, we just fixed it, and why did it just suddenly appear? So let's debug that in a while, and there we go. It fixed due to the elevation property. Now, what is the elevation property? By default, the app bar widget provides some elevation, some default elevation, and what this does is that it adds the shadow to the app bar. So even if we have set its color to transparent, it was still showing that darkish color due to the elevation. Okay, so just adding this one line of code essentially fixed that, which is great. Now, the next thing that we need to do is, of course, add in the text widgets in order to display the album title and the song title, okay? Sorry, artist name and the song title. Okay, so let's give it the song name Gorgeous, because that is what we are replicating over here. And it's by Linium. Sorry, guys. Again, this size box is just for padding, so it's really up to you whether you guys want to use a size box, whether you guys want to wrap it inside a padding widget. It's really all up to you. Okay, so let's get to these textiles. All right. Now we have the title textile and the artist style, so we're just going to be using that. Title style first. So we're just going to use the style property, and I think it was the style. Okay. I'm going to comment that. Looks gorgeous itself. And then we are, of course, gonna give this the style as well, which is artist style, I believe. Yeah. Okay, there we have it. Now, to the main part. This thing, okay? Now, for some of you, this may have struck as pretty simple initially, and for some of you, this may have struck as really difficult initially. But let me tell you guys, while it did look intimidating at first, it was easy when you Google stuff, when you try out different experiments, and you just notice that, okay, things aren't as difficult as they seem, okay? Stack Overflow has the answers to everything. Now, in order to draw this nice looking custom shape, what we're going to be essentially using is a custom painter. Okay, so there are two approaches. You can either go with a custom clipper so that it clips the bottom part of your circle, or you could go with custom painter. While I was trying this initially, I had some issues with the custom clipper because even though it would clip the bottom half of the circle, it wouldn't exactly align it towards the end. And I don't know, there were multiple issues with that, okay? So what we're going to be doing here is that we are going to be using Stack Overflow, one of the answers from Stack Overflow, in order to replicate this nice looking circular effect. So, yeah, this one. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the thing that we need to use, okay? We're giving this a diameter. We are sizing the widget, like what the width and what height should the widget have, and we are using different drawing properties, like what will be our offset, what will be our center, how much the height should be, how much the width should be, you know, all that pretty stuff. So that is pretty simple to use, and it is achieving this effect. So let's just go in and directly copy paste this. Whoops. Let's create a new file. My painter. Okay. A bunch of errors because we haven't imported the material.dart. And of course, we need to import math. So import math as math, because as you can see, we're using the alias here, so we need to declare that over here. And the other thing that we need to change over here is the colors. So for that, let's import our constants file to refer to the hot pink color that we're using. Okay, so far so good. All right. Now, in order to position this directly at the bottom, what we're going to be using is a position widget for this specific section, okay? So that it sticks right towards the end. Note, we're not going to be using it inside the column, otherwise you'll get a bunch of errors because it's used directly inside the children of a stack. So let's use positioned. Okay. Bottom 0. Child. My arc. Errors again because we haven't imported the file yet. So let's do that. And of course, we need to change the diameter because we want it to fit the full width of the screen. Okay. So media query dot of context dot size dot width. Okay, looks good. Now let's see how it goes. Okay, so we do have a good news and a bad news. The good news is that we have this thing, but it's not essentially aligned towards the bottom as we had hoped that we would achieve this effect. Now, why is that? Let's check out the Flutter inspector and see what's happening. So as you can see here, what this has done is that it's taking up this entire space. So what it has done is that while it did custom paint that semicircle, the height that it's taking is still, all this extra space. So what we can do is that let's try to understand the code that we just copied and tweak it as per our use case. So as you can see here, the first thing that I see is the size thing, all right? Now what this size does is that you provided a width and a height, and it provides those, those constraints in order to constrain your widget to those particular dimensions that you've provided. So as you can see here, the first parameter that takes is the width, and the second is the height. We're fine with width. We're not fine with the height. So what we're going to do is divide it by 2, and let's see if that fixes our problem. Now, this did fix our problem, but as you can see, it's rendering this weird looking shape. So let's see what we can do about this. If I change my height over here, let's see what happens. Oh, so we are taking up the full width, but we're not taking up this much height, okay? What is happening? So let's see. If I increase this to 2.5, what will happen? Not good. If I do it 1.5, what will happen? Not good. If I do it 2, what will happen? And it vanishes. So, what can we do here? Let's try to play with this field maybe. Oops, sorry, multiplied by 2. Aha, perfect. So we have achieved this through trial and error. And this is a very natural thing to do. So even if you're copy pasting code from Stack Overflow or from any blog on Google that you found, and obviously the first good news is that you just copy paste the code and it runs right at the first attempt. So that's really nice. But even if it doesn't run as per your use case, it's always good to give that code some time, try to analyze a little what's happening where, even if you don't understand it, you see a bunch of values and a bunch of variables, try playing with them, try doing some trial and error, and you'll get there eventually. Okay, now, the next thing that we want to do is that we need our buttons, okay? We need our buttons set up in a row. So if you can see here, we have all these 3 buttons neatly set up in a row. So that's what we're going to do. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to wrap my arc inside a stack so that I can overlay all of my inner widgets on top of it, okay? Wrap with do column stack so we don't have to deal with the other things. Okay, use a positioned, yeah, because we need to position the widget over the stack. Okay, positioned row. Gonna use the commas for code formatting. Top 50, let's say. Yeah, left 20, right 20, just to center it. Children, right, okay. So we need an icon button. Oops, give it an icon parameter. Use the icon. Get the, okay, what is the rewind? Okay. Now, as you can see, this we have some highlights over here. This means that we're missing a mandatory parameter. Over here, in case of icon button, that's usually the on tap or on press. So let's do that and just do a print. Rewind. And forward. Okay, let's see how this looks. Okay, this looks pretty ugly. Now, let's give these buttons a size and a color. Okay, so we're using the size 42 for the buttons. We're using the color 50 colors white 54. So let's do that. Size 42, color white 4. Okay, looks good. Copy pasting this here. Oh, sorry. All right, now I know that this is out of alignment right now. We're gonna be fixing that soon. But first, let's make our play button, okay? Now, as you can see here, the play button is a round icon button and it has a nice elevation. So instantly I Googled that how to create a circular button with an icon, and Stack Overflow, my usual help gateway, And we have this nice looking code that renders this. Okay, so let's use this directly. Copy, paste, and zoom it here, add the commas. 10, 50. Fill color, we need to use hot pink. So hot pink color. And of course, we need to add an elevation. 20. Aha, looks perfect. And the color, of course, color, let's give it a color of white. Ah, looks perfect. Now let's give these some spacing between the buttons. Okay. Give it a size box with, I don't know, 10. Let's try with this. Looks kind of good. And of course, we need to center it so. All right, another thing that we need to do is that while I did say that I won't be using this part, what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be shifting this part inside it, because otherwise all of this space, it'll look really bad. Okay, so we need to fill up the space with something. So let's fill it up with this. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we will wrap this button row inside a column. So let's do that. And yeah, okay. Don't worry about this, guys. I'll be fixing it later. Where's my column? Here it is. Okay. Now the next thing that we need is a slider so that we can see what the values are over there. Let's give it an initial value of 0.1 maybe. On change. This takes a double, so double val. And yeah. Okay, let's give it an initial value too, which is by min. Min takes a double, so of course we're starting off at 0, and we are going up to, let's say, 100. Okay, we have our slider here. We need to obviously change the colors. So let's type color, and we have the active color, and let's give that pink. No, white. Okay, so far so good. The other thing that we need to do is obviously add these timestamps, and we're going to do that inside a row. Okay, so add comma for pretty formatting. Get a size box for some padding, height 6 maybe. I think that should suffice. Row. Main axis alignment, we need main axis space between, because one part is placed in the beginning, the other part is placed at the end. So between will create a lot of space between them. So they're both positioned at the extreme sides of the screen. Okay. Get a children. Okay, let's give it text 0, 0, 0. -3, 6. Let's see how that looks. Okay, perfect. We gotta reduce this a little bit so it's more towards the upper part. And of course, let's get a style. So here we have, right, the time style. Okay. Time style. Copy this, paste it here. Aha, looks pretty. Now, we are kind of running short on time, and I hope that I'd be able to even integrate the audio player and show you guys how we can do that, but let's see how we can do this. Okay, so if I click here, this is my row, and it's here. So as you can see, my row is placed perfectly fine, but the buttons here, they're left aligned. So with this, we have figured out that we need to fix its alignment issue. Let's try this. Main axis alignment, the center. And we have fixed this issue as well. Okay, so this is good. The other thing that we need to do is that I'm going to be quickly consuming the audio player and just use some of the main functions so that you can see that even if you interact with the layout, how the layout responds, all that stuff, we're going to be going through that very quickly. Okay, so this is a nice plugin that I found as its audio player. It's very stable. It supports both iOS and Android. And it allows you to play files from the network, from the assets, local, all that fancy stuff, okay? So let's add the dependency to our pubspec.yaml. Packages.get. And of course, meanwhile we're doing that, let's add this song to our project. Add a new directory, assets, add another directory. This is just up to you guys. I just like to keep my code modularized. Audios. And let's paste the song here. Give it the name song1.mp3. Do we have that? Yes, we do. As you can see, we have integrated our dependency for playing the audio. So let's delve into assets and assets, audios. That should pretty much do it. Okay, so let's consume it right away. Okay, in order to consume it, we need to import this file. So let's do that. Let's go to the documentation. It's pretty straightforward. You guys can explore it later on. I'm just going to be doing it very, very quickly because we're running short of time. But I also want to do that in order to give you guys the essence of, interaction and UIs. Okay, so let's set this up. Let's add in the init state method. Let's override it. Super.initState. And of course, we will be needing another variable by the name of is playing so that we can check what the state of the app is, okay? Whether the song is playing, whether it's not playing, what's happening, okay? Boom is playing by default, it's false. Okay, so as you can see here, this is a function that we need in order to play our file. So let's do that in init state. Now note, you gotta add in this auto start false, otherwise the file will just start playing as soon as the app opens. Okay, and we don't want that. So we have this. Then we set up a bunch of listeners. As you can see, there is a listener by the name of is playing. Let's listen to this. And sorry for the lag, guys. My my Android Studio is eating up a lot of RAM. Okay, undefined name is playing. Bro, what? Oh, damn it. Okay. All right. The other thing that we want to do is play the app, play the song. Okay. All right, now what we're going to do here is that we're going to check whether the song is playing so that we can render the icons accordingly. If the song is playing, we want to show the pause icon. Otherwise, we want to show the play icon. Play. Okay. Gonna stop the application, do a full code restart because we've added bunch of because we've added an additional dependency, we've added a song, so it needs to take all of that into the consideration and load up all the resources. While we're doing that, let's explore the documentation a little further and see what we can do in order to play the song. Okay, so as you can see here, we have a bunch of nice functions that we'll be using. This one is a really handy function. Play or pause depending on the state of the song. When it's called, it will either pause the song if it's already playing, or it'll play the song if it's paused or stopped. Okay, so that's what we will be doing over here. So dot pause. I think it should be sufficient. Meanwhile, let's try to see what other listeners that we can add here. Okay, so what this does is that it listens to what audio is playing, and then based on that, it returns some of its metadata, like the full duration of the song and all of that nice stuff. Okay, since we did load up the song, let's see what happens when we try to play it. Okay. It is playing. I hope you guys can hear that. And as you can see, while the song is playing, it's the icon that's showing here is the paused icon. We have clicked on it again, and it's showing the play icon. We click on it again, the song resumes, and it shows the pause icon. Okay, so that's the basic thing. I wish I could really show you guys the full working of this screen, like how you can essentially interact with this slider, how you can update it in real time as the song is playing. But since we're running short on time, I won't be able to do that. But since I did code this last night, I do have the application, and I can show you guys how I achieved that before. Okay, just gonna do that. Then we're gonna quickly head off to the Q&A session. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment, and I will be answering it. Okay, so this was the application. It looks a little bigger because obviously the radius is bigger. So guys, cut me some slack. As you can see, when I click on this play button, the song starts playing. This starts updating the starting time, like how much time has elapsed, how much time is remaining. And as you can see, the seeker is also moving. I can seek it, and it just updates it right there and then. Okay, now just a quick overview of how I did this. This Assets Audio Player, it provides a bunch of listeners. I was using this current listener, like audioplayer.current. I was using audioplayer.current position. What current does is that it fetches the current audio that's playing, and it fetches its metadata, like the complete duration of it and all of that stuff. So that's how I got the complete duration from. And I just converted that duration object into a string object to show this little thing over here. The other thing that I was using for this part and for this part I was using current position. So I wrapped this specific widget, this text widget, inside a stream builder, because it's constantly listening to that listener and it's constantly updating its values as the new values are updated. Okay, that's all that I did here. I just wrapped this text widget inside a stream builder, and inside the stream I called assets audio player dot current position, and I just used the value that I was getting there. And for this thing, what I did was, you see this function on value changed. Where'd it go? Right here on changed. It takes a double val. So obviously, when you're seeking it, it detects how much value you have changed it by, or what the value currently is. And then here, all I did was that I called the audio player dot seek to. So this song can seek to that particular timestamp to which we have changed. Okay, so this was the overall essence of the session. The main point of this was that you can code the most complex of UIs very easily and conveniently in Flutter. The reason it took a little bit long over here was that obviously, I was on mute initially, so there goes my confidence, and there comes the embarrassment. So yeah, things happen. But the essence of this was that I coded this entire screen last night in about 1 hour, and it took me 1 hour because I was experimenting with this thing, and it just took me a really long time to get this thing working. Okay, so the good news is that we have coded this layout. It was pretty complex, but you can see that without using any external dependency, at least for just displaying the widgets, we have made this really beautiful looking music application layout with Flutter, with the Dart code, without using any external dependency, in a bunch of like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So yeah, there's that. Okay, that's it from my side. I will be flashing my contact details now. So if you want to contact me at a later point in time, you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me. This is my official email address, sakina.abbas@reactree.com. This is my LinkedIn URL. This is a QR code for my LinkedIn profile. So if you have a QR scanner in your phone, feel free to scan it. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And there's that. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.
Thank you, Sakina. We have a few questions for you on the stream, but because we're actually running out of time, so if possible, please go to the stream and answer directly. I will ping you the link. And thank you a lot write live demo to show how great Flutter is and how quick you can build a right application with Flutter. And thank you,
Thank
Sakina.
you.
And next, we have our last speaker of the day, Angga. And let's hand over to our last speaker of the day. Hello.
Hello, hello guys. Okay, I should just start now, I guess. Okay, yeah. Okay, hello everyone. I hope you are having a good day right now and staying safe everywhere you are. My name is Angga, and today I'm going to explain a little bit about Redux in Flutter, how to use it, what are the pros, the cons, and how am I using it in my Flutter projects. So yeah, here it is. Oops. Okay, so this is me. My name is Angga Arifandi. You can call me Angga. I'm from Indonesia. I have 2 years experience of Flutter development with me. I have my GitHub page. I published some Flutter libraries there as well. And I also occasionally write blogs on my Medium, which is this is the link. So yeah, you can saw the blog post that I made. All about it is about Flutter. Okay, so first of all, I'll go through the problems I've been experiencing when I'm developing Flutter apps. Okay. So as we all know, Flutter is really early at this stage compared to other mobile development framework like Android native or iOS native or probably compared to React native as well. It was relatively new. Its 1.0 version was released on 4th of December 2018. And that reflects on the state management options that I saw that it keeps changing every year. At least in my opinion, the trend is changing every year. So probably in the first year we have inherited widget, and then after that the scope model start being hyped, and then after that we have block, and then lately we've been using provider a lot, and then also a lot of people are talking about how they use the provider here and there in their Flutter applications. But I see that this could be really confusing if I were to Flutter for the first time. And then yeah, because so the trend is keeps changing, so it's haven't been settled yet, so I don't really know if I used for example provider now, would people be using a provider, or would it still be the best options like 1 or 2 years later after now. And that could be a problem if we wanted to release our application for a long term, for example 4 or 5 years from now. If we keep changing the state management implemented inside our app, it could be a huge pain, right? So another problem that I've been experiencing is Flutter. I think we can all agree that Flutter is so flexible, fast, and UI oriented. And what I mean by this is we all know that in Flutter, everything is basically a widget, right? So from the application itself until a single button or a text is a UI. So it is really convenience writing UI code in Flutter, but I see that this comes with a cost, and that cost is the separation of concern. I think could be can be missed sometimes by a developer inside their apps. And in a nutshell, separation of concern is basically which element should be responsible for what. For example, we could separate three elements inside our applications, which is UI, business, and local database. And those three elements should have a concern of themselves, so they wouldn't meddle in with each other. So for more, so for clear, issues about separation of concern, this is an example. So for example, we could create an example widget. Let's call it an example widget, and then we could. I do this in my early days with Flutter. I call all of the business logic, all the fetching data from API inside the init state. So basically, this means that this widget would have a lot of concern, a lot of responsibility. This widget would be responsible for, calling a controller from business logic, or probably, saving local data or something. And I think that could be, a problem if we plan to release the application in the long run, because as the logic keeps adding, the code in this block would get much more. So there are two problems that I've stated. So first, if it is the state management options trend frequently changing every year or every 2 years, and there are basically too much options in Flutter. So people are getting confused, and other is the separation of concern issues in Flutter. At least in my opinion, I feel that it is really bugging me that we have to do it right in order to be able to maintain the application for a really long time. And I propose a solution for this, which is Redux. So what is Redux? So Redux originally was an experiment by a programmer from Facebook named Dan Abramov. So he was, creating this project for hot reloading with time travel with React at 2015, which is around five years ago. So in a nutshell, a Redux basically works like this, so that you guys wouldn't be confused. So basically, we all have a state inside our application, right? For example, we have a button with a text on it, and if user clicks on it, this state is changing. So this state could be changed only with reducer functions in Redux, and then that state would be changed or transformed into a new state, which we'll see in a bit in next set of slides. And then that new state would be published into the view or widget, so that the view can get that new state and then display something. For example, we could show a switch that are being shown on and off, or something like that. Basically, Redux works like this, so you wouldn't need to put a lot of thought in this. Basically, it's as simple as this. So Redux have three core principles in its official documentation. First is single source of truth, which means that inside the application that implements Redux, if so basically the source of data should be just one. So there shouldn't be any two sets of data that are being listened inside the application. For example, if we have a database 1 and database 2, for example, we should only rely on one single source of truth. So we should create an abstraction layer on top of it. So we should only listen into that abstraction layer. So we shouldn't listen into two source of truth or source of data. And then second one is state is read only. And what this means is we shouldn't mutate state, but what we should do is we should return a new state, and basically a new constructed state, but with different data. Please take a look at the different here, because it is really different between mutating data and creating new sets of data based on old sets of data, and then we change something from it. And then last is changes are made with pure functions. So basically this means that we should always rely with functions to change the data. We shouldn't change the state by hand inside the view or the widget or something. That is disobeying the core principles of Redux. So what's so good about it for Flutter? compared to the problems that are stated in the previous slides. So first, Redux is mature, really mature, and really backed by community. So its v1.0 version was released on 1st of July 2015. It's actually, having its fifth birthday just a while ago. And then the contributors is a lot as well. Last time I checked, they have around 700 contributors. So that is a lot. And it is being used by, I think, a lot of application. I think if you asked a developer, probably more than 1 of 10 have used Redux in their lifetime, I guess. At least most of my developer circles already use Redux. Okay, next one is Redux have been already ported into a lot of platform and language. Redux, originally Redux is available for React, and then it's also available for React Native. And then there are also some ported version for Android, which is RE Kotlin, for example, or Redux Java. And then it was also available for Swift as well. And lastly, it's also available for Flutter as well. So that is a really good point. So last point of why Redux is a really good example or a solution for the problems that I've stated previously was Redux was really easy to test, and we'll see in a bit why I'm saying this. And then after that, the separation of concern in Redux can be really well defined. So what I mean by this is we can make it such it very clearly that each element would be only responsible for one thing and one thing only. And then other element would, take care of other thing for that element. So basically, everything should be, independent. So the dependency between all of those elements would be really minimal. So I really like that. So next up is an example of how could we use Redux in Flutter. So first, the core libs that are available for Flutter or Dart. There are two of them, which is Redux. Right now, it is already having its 4.0 version, so it's pretty mature as well. And then after that, we have a specific version of Redux for Flutter for all of its widgets and then context and then so on and so forth. It's made by Flutter community and Brian Egan. So yeah, kudos to them. And then there are also some utility libs, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't use this lib. I also use this lib for some cases. This is usually for some, advanced features. For example, persisting data or using a synchronous function inside our Redux. So yeah, we can also use this, but I'm not using this in my example. So let's cut to the chase and see the exact code. Okay. So the project that we'll be doing today is this really simple application that have a registration process. So basically, user should just fill their email at email.com, for example, and then they should just submit their email. They could also click back to back to one previous process, and then after that they will need to fill their username, and after that they will click register. And when they click register, we will try to verify their data, and that is a dummy, and we will see in a bit. And after that, we'll show a dialog which shows register success. And then if we click OK, we could, go or redirect it to a completion page. And then we could click reset and go back to the beginning again. So that is a simple app, and we'll see how could we do this with Redux implemented inside this application. Okay, so what will be covered is first the basic state management with Redux in Flutter, which consists of having this number right here or state, which is basically just this is the step one, and then we could go to step two, and then we could go back to step one again. We could to see how that should work inside the Redux Flutter application. And then after that, we could also see how to navigate between pages with Redux as well. And then last but not least, we could see how to execute a complex process with Redux. For example, hitting the API or fetching data from the API, or probably saving data to a local database. Something like that. And then for this example, I've created a short link for this, which is right here. You can see it. Basically, this consists of the GitHub repository that I've uploaded of this application. So you can see it for yourself as well if you more convenience with that. Okay, so the dependencies needed for this application is just a few. We would need the core Redux dependencies, which is Redux and Flutter Redux. And then after that, we would also need a copy with extension. And what is this? Is basically this could copy Dart object, a plain Dart object, into a new one with a change data or attributes or something. So yeah, this is all. Next up is this app structure. We could see it right here. Basically, we would organize it like this. So we would have three main folders, which is app, core, and then UI. And then main.dart will call, basically will consist of only this code. And then the app application file would be inside the app folder. And then after that, we'll go through the core would be for handling business logics and so on and so forth. And the UI is pure UI. Basically, it would just consist of nothing but UI, and then it would dispatch some actions for Redux, but we'll see in a bit. Okay, so how Redux works in a nutshell inside Flutter. I think I need to explain this for all of you who haven't any experience with Redux before. So basically, we have a state, right? This is a state, for example. This is the first step of the registration process. That is the state. So that state would be passed into a view. And this is a view, the text that I'm showing, one or two. And then after that, for example, if user taps screen, for example, this button right here, it would change the state. Also, how it would work in Redux. So it would dispatch an action like this. So what happened right here? So the app would dispatch an action. And then after it dispatch an action, it would call the reducer function, and we'll see in a bit what this would look like. Basically, reducer function is a function to mutate state, or not mutate state, to create a new state based on some conditions from this action. And then after that, the reducer function would create a new state, and then those new state will be sent or be delivered into the view. So this text is changing, will showing this back button. Yeah, so that is basically it. And one other thing is one additional thing is we use middleware. And what is middleware is basically it intercepts an action. For example, this submit email action would be intercepted by a middleware, and we could do something in it. For example, we wouldn't let this action be dispatched or be ran if some condition are not met or something. Yeah, we could use middleware exactly for that. So first of all, we'll go into the Redux folder inside the core folder, the main core folder, and then inside the Redux. So we'll first talk about the state. So basically, we'll have to prepare the state for this screen, which is the registration state, which consists of a simple email string and then username string as well. And then we would have an enum called registration step. So wait a minute. Basically, the registration step is just a simple enum that consists of first and last. We could add anything right here. So basically, the idea is having this status where we could know the exact state of our registration process. That is all. So yeah, it would look like this. And then we could also, insert some default value for the parameters or attributes as well. For in this case, so we set the default value for step only for step to the registration step dot first, because it makes sense, right? Every time the user comes to the app, it would be showing the first step. And then after that, we would go to the app state, which is the whole state. This state would, be consist of this screen only. But let's say we have another screen. For example, we have a login screen, for example, or a forgot password screen. And then probably we will have to create a new state. Probably not, but probably we would have to create a new state here. For example, login underscore state, and then create a new one, something like this, with the information needed inside our login page, for example. And then after that, we would, include the registration state inside the app state, and then define the default value for it, which this expression right here would execute this. So it would be a null email, and then null username, and then the step would be set into registration step dot first. So that is all for step. For state, I'm sorry. And then after that is the action. Like I, try by clicking this, it would run the submit email action. Right? And then if I click this, it would hit or run a different action. So what are the actions that we need inside this simple application? So basically, we would need, just ignore the others. We would just focus on the registration for now. So we would have five action. First is go to first page action, which will be dispatch or run when we click this back button, because it makes sense, right? It would reset the enum, the step enum into the first step, because right now it is in the last step. And then as for the go to last page action, it would be dispatched when we click the submit email button. And then for the submit action, it would be run into the run when we click this register button. And then we would call this registration success action whenever we've done hitting or fetching data from the API, or probably verifying if the username and email is valid and not registered before in our database. And after that, after we call this, it would show this dialog right here, which says register success. And then if we click OK, it would, we have this reset button, which, resets all of those that we've done before. And then we are going back into the first, the original state. Okay, so that is for actions. After that, we would have the reducer. So what a reducer is, just basically just function that can create a new state from old one with something changing from it. Okay, for example, let me open the reducers. Okay, so we will define the reducer for all of the actions that we just defined before, right here. So for example, the go to first page action, we would just need to, this is all just a placeholder. You can copy it from my repository. and then we could just define a reducer or the transformation function for the go to first page action. And then after that, it would receive the action and then the old state, and then it would return a new state, a whole new state that we've been transformed before. So in this case, go to first reducer would only change the step into the registration step dot first, right? That makes perfect sense. And then that also goes with go to last. We would just change it to last, and then we could also do something from it. For example, I could store the email instead in case I need it for the future for another screen. And then for this submit reducer, basically it would just call the or change the username into the user defined one. So if I input this as Angga, it would change into something that I've been typing. And as for reset, we would just reset the whole state into a completely new one. That is all for reducer. So as of right now, we would define all the actions, the reducers, and the state. So everything was in place. We could just use this for our widget right here. So how to use that is there's actually a lot of strategies to do this, but one of these strategies that I've been implementing in my projects was to create a class called App Store. So basically, this class would just have one function called create store, which will init this store, and then it would return the store. Wait, this have something else. Okay, let's see in this one. So basically, we could just create this store right here by calling app store dot create store, and then we could call the reducer dot reduce function. Wait, I think I forgot to explain about the. Oh wait, yeah, this is the reducers. So this is also just a placeholder. Basically, we would store all the reducers inside our map, and inside the map, for example, if I add some gene reducer, I could call something like add all gene reducers and so on and so forth. So you can just copy this exact code. This is not final. This is just a strategy to how can we make this as clean as possible, as neat as possible. So I'm doing it like this. So I just call this function reducer.reduce inside this store creation, and then I would define the initial state, which is just a plain creation of app state. And then after that, we would have to wrap our app.dart inside the store provider. So basically, this is the same thing like provider. We could just create the store file, and then I'm creating this on initialization of our application. So basically, inside the constructor, I would create this store. Just ignore the navigator key. We will get back into that later. And then after that, so inside this material app and its children, we can already use this store, this instance of store, everything. I'm sorry, everywhere. I mean, so basically, we can just use this for dispatching store, dispatching actions, like I'm talking previously, or do something with it. Or we can just use it directly. Okay, so how to use upstate inside widget? So to use this, we would need something called store connector, and it receives a builder and a converter, and then the converter was to. So basically, this Flutter Redux package that was created in pub.dev doesn't let us, just use, or it is. I think it's not a good practice to use directly the app state inside our widget. So we have to convert it into something else. So usually we'll have a view model. So basically this is just an object of state for that exact view. So if we have two page, register and login, we would have two different view model, register view model and login view model. So how would it look like? It would look like this. So basically we would just create a step text. Step text is basically this 1/2 and then 2/2. This is the string that will supply into the widget. We can make it, this can be anything you want, basically. This is just, my strategy of using a div state and then converting it into view model. And then after that, we could pass in some state or some object inside the view model. For example, in my UI state was basically just an enum. This is also a good rule of thumb. So basically in Redux, we should, separate this app state, the global state, a state for everything inside the app, and the local state. And the local state, what I mean by local state is the state for this exact screen or this exact widget. We should separate this. So we shouldn't, use, because we already create an enum in the registration state, right? Something called registration step. And we shouldn't use this inside the widget. But this is a good rule of thumb, I think. So this create a better, separation. So basically, the global state would stay as it is. It would consist of only global state. And for local state like this, we could, create some additional files or object, for example, like this registration UI state, something like this. It probably makes no sense if I do it like this, because it is basically just the same enum. But probably if you've developed a really big application and then it have a lot of business logic inside it, probably there is someone who are taking care of the backend part or the logic part, and then there will be some other person who are in charge of the view only. It would make perfect sense because every layer would have its own concern. So basically, the UI wouldn't be taking care of any of app state. So they will only care about the registration view module, and then that's all. So I think that is a good rule of thumb. Okay, so on the converter, it's basically just converting the information received from the app state. For example, I would in case of the step being registration step at first, I would show step text as 1/2, and then for last would be 2/2 or something like this. So that is all for the converter. And last but not least, so we could just use the store connector right now already. So basically, in this phase, we would already see this screen right here. We could receive the app state inside the view or the widget itself. So that is good. The first step is done. So next step is navigating between pages with Redux. Okay, so for example, user is in page A, and then after that, a user clicks a button, and then user have to be navigated to page B, right? So usually we'll have this navigator of context dot push or dot pop or something else. So how to do this with Redux? Okay, luckily we have something in Flutter called a navigator key. So basically it's a global key on a navigator state. So we could create a global key and then have a reference to it, and then we could just call a navigator key dot current state dot push something. So this is the exact same equivalent as this navigator dot off context dot push. This is basically the same thing. Okay, so how would we, create this in Redux? How would we use this? So basically, it would work like this. So user in page A, For example, this is another page by the way. For example, if I'm in this page and when I click register, it would show some dialog and then show another dialog, and then if we click OK, we would be redirected into another set of page, right? So how would we do this? So basically all we do is whenever a user clicks a button, we would just dispatch one action and one action only. That is the entry point action, we could say. And then that entry point action could be intercepted in the middleware. And then when the action is intercepted in the middleware, we could just call this code. But calling this code is not elegant, right? It's not a neat. So we would have all of this navigator key, the current state dot push everywhere inside the middleware. So we should make it some definition on what action or what navigation action could be done inside this scheme. So I define some action right here. For example, I have this navigate to next action, which is equivalent of navigator.push. And then I have also a navigate to next and replace action, which is the equivalent of navigator.push replacement. And then I also have a show dialog, show bottom sheet, and navigate back. This is the definition, and I think you can create it for yourself. But if we see it right here, we have this class, navigation destination. So what is it basically? Okay, so navigation destination is just an abstraction layer that I created for this, Redux theme. Basically, it would have one function called build widget. So we will need to define the destination of each and every page. For example, when we click register, it would show the loading dialog. It will have one destination. And then this success dialog right here will also have its own navigation destination. And we click OK. And then this also will have its own destination. So it's probably something like an enum or something, but we'll have a definition of how this destination would be rendered inside the application. And one good thing is we could also, this is the example of navigation destination. We could also, insert some arguments or some parameters inside this destination and then pass it into the, build widget method. So I think this is very handy. I've been using it for a while now, and I think this is, really easy to be done inside the widget. Okay, so that is it for the navigation. Next up is, oh wait, okay, let me probably explain to you what happened inside this register button. By the way, I don't feel any validation for this because that doesn't matter now. So yeah, we can ignore it. So basically when we click this register button, what it does is basically, let's see. Okay, wait a minute. Oh, wait. Let's go back. Oh, that is okay. So this page is called the last step page, last registration page. I divide it into two files so it can be more clean, I guess. And then after that, in case of register, clicked right here. We could just dispatch one action only, the entry point action. I call it a submit action. So as I was explaining, the submit action, basically inside the reducer, if we see it clearly, it would just change add the username that is being filled right here. But we insert some middleware inside of it called navigation middleware. So what it does, I'm sorry, the registration middleware, for example, I'm sorry, the registration middleware, we are calling the submit action. Okay, so the submit action will call the handle submit action before continuing into changing the app state. And in this state, we will call a store dot dispatch dot show dialog action with the destination is loading dialog destination. So basically this will call this verifying your data dialog. That is all it does. And then after that, I created a dummy controller right here to mock the API behavior. So I also created an onSuccess function. So inside the onSuccess function, we would call the store.dispatch registration success action. So what I mean by this is when we click this register button, it would only show it would only dispatch just one action, which is submit action, and then those submit action would handle everything about logic or about fetching data or storing local data into database. And then after that, it would call the registration success action, which registration success action will close the loading dialog before, and then after that show a new dialog which is showing the register success text. And then after that, it could have a button click, and then it could navigate to the next destination, which is the complete registration complete destination. So yeah, as you can see, this registration page would only call and care about dispatching the that is the wrong thing, dispatching the submit action, and that is all. All of the logic behind it would be taken care inside the middleware. So I think that is nice because we will have really flexibility, and it would be really easy to test this, because all we should do is just mock this store provider that dispatch submit action is being called, and that's all. We wouldn't have to care about anything else in that. So yeah, okay, that's all for navigation. And then as for the complex operation, I actually already gave you an example on the middleware right here. So the middleware we call the API controller.call API, right? This is the mock of a complex operation. For example, we could store a data or fetch an API or something like here, and then after that we could call something else, and then everything would be handled inside the middleware, and then the UI would only care about the entry point action, and that is all. So yeah, I think that is very handy. Okay, so this is our application. It's actually pretty simple, but I think using Redux, we can make this simple application really testable, and the separation of concern is really clear in this application. Yes. Okay, so next up is, wait, I already explained about this. This as well. Okay, so last is the pros and cons of using Redux inside our application, inside our Flutter application. So the pros is one, I think each element has very clear responsibility and concerns. Say if we have a new programmer or a developer, explaining things to him would be really easy, and defining the docs would be super easy, because everything is already have its responsibility. And for example, if we want to separate the concern of one developer only for handling logic and other developer only for handling UI, I think that would be really easy. And I think a single source of truth is really one powerful concept in Redux. So I really loved it. And then after that, it will be really easy to test and can give clear directions for that as well. And the cons is definitely this would took longer time to implement compared to other state management, or if we don't use state management at all, it would take a lot of time by using this Redux. And then it is quite complicated compared to other options. For example, if we use provider, it would be much simpler. So I think the rule of thumb here is if probably this would be really suitable for if you wanted to, you have a vision that this app would really stick for you for a long time, for example, 4 or 5 years. And then if you would have a lot of devs to work on it, And then, yeah, I think that could be a good rule of should I use Redux in our application or should I use Redux in my application? Yeah, something like that. Okay, thank you. That is all from me. If you have any question, don't hesitate to ask right now, or if you wanted to email me, you can do that as well. My email is right here, Arifandi96@gmail.com. Okay, thank you. Back to
Thank
you,
you,
Ken.
Angga.
And
If you have other questions for him, feel free to go to the give your put comment on the stream on Facebook or YouTube. And
okay,
thank you for joining us today.
yes,
Thank you.
sure.
So thanks everyone for joining us today. And that's the last talk we have for you. And uh, we, uh, we have a feedback form here. It's very quick, like 2-3 minutes. So please help us fill in the form so we can improve and have a better session for you in the future. Please follow us on YouTube or Google Dev Space or Facebook or GG Live Pakistan for future talk and activities. Thank you and have a good weekend. Bye, everyone.